And welcome. We're back at Breaking the Silence. We have a special guest tonight, Dennis Shelgren, who some of you saw the secret story on or listened to saw and listened to the secret story that Mary did. I'm going to get more into his story and ask him some questions about the things he remembers when he was a child, because that's fascinating, the things that he saw. There's a lot to report to what's going on here at the studio with the show and everything else, but I'm going to keep it to just a little bit about that. And of course, you know, we got the night vision camera and we've already been successful at capturing something on it. And Mary and I, or just about every night before going to bed, we go out in the backyard and we're going to keep on trying to get even more spectacular things. It's busy up there. And you really need a night vision camera, a good one, to be able to know that, especially if you're in the city. So that's been amazing. And there's going to be this Saturday, Mary shot an unboxing of it, and then we go outside and actually use it so you can see that. So, of course, I'm working on the next show, which is, Shelby is going to be the next episode, and she's going to go into detail about her story, and I'm going to reenact it. And then also I'm working on what I call The Part, which is an experience I had. I think I've shared with you some of back a few years ago that was just utterly amazing. And that's also going to be an all CGI show. So let's bring on Dennis. Dennis,
hello.
Thanks for being here.
No problem at all.
So, I know that that Mary covered a lot of things in Secret Stories. I'm not sure everybody listened to it. So if you want to begin at the beginning.
Sure, I was about 11 years old, and that was kind of the first time I'd really experienced aliens personally.
Hmm.
Um, my great uncle was a person that was mistaken for being an MIB, and
Hmm.
it's kind of a funny story. He did nuclear work, and during that process, they discovered that they often had interruptions during nuclear tests by unknown things. And so one of his jobs was actually go out to the public and research that. And it's not necessarily, it wasn't originally his main job, but it became his main job because basically once a bomb goes off, your job is kind of done. So his job was really to find out what else is happening. And so because they weren't prepared to do this, kind of what the military did was they just made up outfits for these guys. These are civilian scientists, and that's who you'd call because they've got the experience and the technology and being open-minded. You don't
So
want a
they
bunch of
put him in uniform.
yeah, you don't want a bunch of soldiers going
Yeah,
out and
I've
interviewing
heard
people.
this. I have heard this.
So they would basically just throw together uniforms. And this is where you get the storyline of, their name tags saying just random letters or gibberish or a name that doesn't make any sense. You can't look them up. Well, they weren't soldiers. They were just scientists sent out there to interview people and find out, hey, did you see something? Because they do these nuclear tests and whatever happened stuck around.
Hmm.
So there'd be a test, and then for the next week or so, people would have sightings. And so he got really involved in that. And so I got to see a lot of the research materials that he would bring to family events because at that point it wasn't super duper top secret. It was just a mystery. They really hadn't clamped things down yet. And so he had a bunch of files, old files, and, they were all marked with all sorts of code numbers that at the time, being a young child, I didn't understand them. But you'd have these photographs of craft and dead aliens and the whole 9 yards. And I thought this went a little bit beyond just investigating. And he said, well, yeah, the couple went down and we grabbed them. Um, stories like Roswell and things like that are
Hmm.
close, but not what he saw or what he experienced. So that was really my first experience into that.
So,
That whole
so, so, what do you remember that you could describe to us when looking at those photographs, particularly of the beings themselves or bodies?
uh, Well, these were partial, not exactly entire aliens.
Right.
But yeah, no, they were pictures of, little gray guys on stretchers. These were clearly photos taken early on in the process. I've never seen any photographs of autopsies or interviews or anything like that. I've just seen photos of, something went down and it looked like a crime scene. Exactly like what you would imagine CSI photos would look like, with
So
the
these are
little
photographs taken at the crash site, and
yeah, with the little, the
bodies were
numbers.
disfigured.
Yeah, the numbers and letters next to them, just like you'd see it at like a car accident or a crime scene.
Wow.
It was actually kind of boring, other
Well,
than the
when
fact that
you're
it
a
was
kid,
aliens.
yeah, because you
Yeah.
don't know, but was there enough of them that you could recognize the facial detail?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, these are partial beings. This is clearly a bad accident. But yeah,
Hmm.
no, these are the, what you call the classic gray aliens, the big eyes and the teeny tiny little noses
Hmm.
and, not really visible ears and the long fingers.
Hmm.
That's what I remember. Um,
Hmm.
Oddly enough, I don't recall ever seeing any photographs of their feet. So, that was
Isn't that
something
something?
I noticed.
Yeah. Wow. And the craft, what were the, or was it just a mess of material, or did you actually
Uh,
get a
there
sense?
was there was one that looked to be entirely complete, which, as a young kid, I'm kind of confused. I'm like, well, if you have a car crash, there's going to be bits and pieces everywhere, and it looked like the ship was fine. It was kind of saucer-like, but instead of having sharp edges, it was rounded on the corners.
Hmm.
Like it was molded or grown. not like it
Hmm.
was built and welded. And in the photos, I never saw any damage on it at all. So maybe they just slapped her on the inside and got creamed.
Hmm. Wow. What a memory to have. So what came after that?
Well, I was kind of warned, that once you get into the subject deeply enough, it's as if they, whatever they are, I mean, I refer to them as aliens, but I don't know. But I was told
No,
that
none of us do.
once you get in the subject deeply enough, they may know and they may take an interest. And that's how he described it, was that's part of their mission, is to be of interest to us and us to be an interest of them. So, that was young. And then by the time I was 11, I had my first experience. And that's actually why I picked this background. It's a quantum
Okay.
computer, but it's the closest thing, a photo I could find that looks like what happened, because it was
Huh.
literally in the middle of the night, and then all of a sudden, this thing was plugged into my head,
Huh.
and I didn't even see aliens. I had no idea what had happened. Just I heard a voice saying, don't worry, it won't hurt. We got to fix a few things. I had no idea what that meant. I thought maybe this was a dream, but it
Yeah, I've heard that
wasn't.
too.
It,
I've heard that exactly. We're going to fix a few things. We're going to nothing will hurt. We need to check you out, check your body, do some tests, and then we'll send you on your way.
yeah, and
Huh.
that was kind of the first experience, and it was kind of the first time that I thought maybe there's something to this. I was still kind of a skeptic, and at that time, I didn't see any aliens. It was just a very strange experience. And then later, I actually got to see them. And, our house is a kind of a funky shape. It had like a U shape to it. So I was at one end of the house, my parents were at the other, and there
Hmm.
was like a little gap between the two ends of the house. And there was always leaves back there. So you could hear if somebody was walking around, and it sounded like a small animal. It didn't sound like a person walking around. They would make a lot more crunching noises with the leaves, but these guys just sounded like a small dog or a cat or something. And you could, there was always a sense of high strangeness. You knew this wasn't something normal. You knew it wasn't a dog or a cat.
Hmm.
It was a feeling.
Hmm.
And then, I started to see them more regularly. And, at first I thought that this is not happening. And I couldn't recall at the time, but there was some event where they were like, go back in your room. And they had a wand or something and they were pointing it at me. And I just went, ah, the heck with this. And I just smacked it out of its little hand. And it felt like he wasn't even there. And the next day, I didn't really recall until after the fact, but I
Hmm.
was with a couple of my friends and they were being, a bunch of boys being silly and looking at the kids playing at the pool next door. We had a pool too, but it was more fun to watch other people. Um, one of my friends picked up this little rod. It was just left there. And then I remembered. I'm like, wait a minute. And he picked it up and was just like, uh-oh, I should not be touching this. This is not safe. And started kind of fooling with it and was like, oh, I better stop doing that. And about then, it just disappeared. It was just gone. And there was a moment or two of utter confusion because somebody had picked something up off the ground, they had it in their hand, and then it wasn't there anymore. And it was almost like there was a split second of missing time for everyone, like a second or two. And that terrified that group of friends. And I really only kept one friend out of that group.
Yeah, well, that's something we're familiar with too. The uh, the ones I know about, I've seen myself, and I've heard numerous people describe them. So they're usually metallic and featureless. These,
Yeah.
and they go to a very almost sharp point.
Yep.
Very very. I'm not sure what they're used for.
I As far as I can tell, it's part of controlling you. Like if their mental ability isn't strong enough,
Hmm.
it's like an amplifier or something.
Hmm.
Because it seemed like when I knocked it out of his hand, they were like, "Okay, we're done. You'll take care of yourself. We're out." So I think it's just a tool, and I think later in the process of experiencing, it's not required. And so I only saw it a few other times, but it wasn't really used or they didn't do anything with it.
Hmm. So what
It,
happened after that?
well, after that, this is the story that starts out terrifying and ends up kind of funny. Uh, a while later, I experienced what a lot of people do, which is I call it the boogeyman time or the apocalypse time, where
Hmm.
they try to show you things that are terrifying or warnings. You know, your world's going to explode. You have to, become a steward or whatever. And they had tried to do that directly, like sometimes they can stare at you and kind of project directly
Yeah.
images in your mind.
Hmm.
And that seemed to not work with me. So they went, okay, well, we have another way to do this. And so they put me in their little spacecraft. And I always found it so funny. I would always ask them kind of mentally, or verbally at this time, why can't other people see your spaceship? And they're like, we're just outside. And I never really understood that at the time. I understand now they're not in a different dimension. It's kind of like they're a second to the left of time.
Yes. Hmm.
And so
It's temporal. It's
yeah,
temporal.
so
Yeah.
they'd throw me in a little spaceship and take me somewhere. I
But the
don't
little
think I
one, you say a little one, and because I've experienced little craft, but that were smaller than the saucer shaped ones. Can you describe that small craft, the little one?
uh kind of a almost a classic flying saucer shape.
Hmm.
The number one detail that I remember was they didn't need to land. I was expected to see it on the ground with a ramp or something. Nope. It was just in the air, and the thing that I noticed the most was it had almost kind of like a lotus flower shape on the bottom of it
Hmm.
that had like little panels that kind of glowed. It seemed organic to me, and I don't those smaller ones I never recall getting on board. I think we just
Hmm.
floated up into it and you were on board.
Yeah.
And so they would then take me somewhere and then they would show me these apocalypse doom and gloom scenes. And usually when I had experiences with these beings, it seemed like they would reflect whatever designation you gave them. If you said, "Are you the aliens?" you'd get back in monotone, "We are the aliens." Are you the visitors? We're the visitors. Are you leprechauns? We're leprechauns. It wouldn't really matter. But it always felt like if you saw like two or three of them, you knew who was number three, who was number two, and who was number one. And during this doom and gloom, I saw number two and number three, and number one was missing. And then there was a new number one. But instead of sensing number three and number two, it was number three, number two, and Jerry. And I kind of looked at number two and I'm like, why is he Jerry? He just is.
Hmm.
So they took me up and they showed me terrible apocalypse scenes and people dying and babies burning and, anything you can imagine that would be horrific to show a person. And Jerry asked, I liked Jerry. I don't know why.
Hmm.
Um, he seemed nice. He seemed to have a sense of humor. And he asked me to do something terrible. And I don't know what it was. It was so terrible that I just reached back because they were behind me, showing me evil. I just reached back and just grabbed his neck and it killed him. And number two and number three responded with, "Oh, that's fascinating. You killed Jerry." And then number three, without even skipping a beat, goes, "He's not getting up from that." And they were completely nonplussed. Like, this is just an everyday thing that can occur. You know, Jerry shouldn't have done that.
Huh.
And they went on and showed me more terrifying things. And about a week later, I was taken again. And it was the same number two, number three, but there was no number one. There was no Jerry. and they took me to the big ship, as I call it, which may not have been a ship. It could have been somewhere on Earth. And they said, well,
Hmm.
Jerry was old. And they just were nonplussed by it because I was still traumatized by it. I thought, oh, crap, I killed Jerry. And they do like a tour of the big ship. And this is the first time. Hey, Eli, what's up?
How long does mom go?
Sorry, my kid's distracting me here for a
Hey,
second.
mom.
Oh, okay.
Does
Like
mom wait?
5 minutes?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
He's good. So they took me on this big ship and did the tour, and you could see like ships stacked up
Hey,
like
Dad.
like dishes.
How long does Dad wait?
Mhm.
5 minutes.
So they do the tour, and we're going down a hallway, and just number three goes, and he said, like, do you want to know about Jerry? And I go, yeah. And he just presses on the wall, and it opens like a shelf, and there's what looks like a bunch of dead aliens in there. And I was very confused. And he just goes, spare shells. And I'm like, what do you mean spare shells? And he goes, new Jerry. I'm like, what do you mean new Jerry? And he's like, you got to touch this. And I'm like, I don't want to touch this. So he's like, you have to. So he takes my hand and puts it on the what I thought was a dead alien. And then I'm looking back at myself, and I realize, oh, you guys are just interchangeable. You don't understand death because it's like a computer. You could almost instantly be in a new body. And then they turned around and they go, well, there's Jerry. And it was a shinier new model of Jerry. Jerry looked old, and this one didn't, but it was still Jerry. And I just found that kind of hilarious that they were like, oh, that's not a problem. We'll just get a new one. And it was such a strange experience because, I know people who are like, have you ever tried to fight back? You know, does it matter? No, it doesn't.
Hmm. Yeah, I've never tried to fight back. I just didn't have a reason to do it. But they certainly understand that the body's not who they are. So,
Yeah.
so what happened? What happened after that? And what's going on today with you in all this?
I haven't seen him in probably about 10 years.
10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, about the last time I saw him, they were treed by my dog, which was just utterly hilarious to go out in the middle of the night and see a bunch of aliens in a tree and a border collie barking them up a tree. And their response was kind of like, we can't control that one. And that was, I think, the last experience that I can really recall.
Hmm.
It's not like I can't hear them. I think, you know, in the intervening time, I was able to ask, I think, every question most people would ask of the aliens.
Hmm.
And some of the answers take a lot of time to understand. I mean, if you give me any question that you would ask of the aliens, I'd probably ask that.
So you asked probably the classic ones like, where are you from? Why are you here? Do you have a god? Do you have death? Which really is kind of a silly question to ask them, really. But
Yeah, I mean, when I've asked them, where are you from? They just say outside. And it kind of makes sense to me now that it's not necessarily that they're displaced from us in space.
hmm.
Maybe they're displaced from us in time. And that I'm kind of okay with that. They're so alien that it's beyond surreal. And it feels to me like that answer satisfies me. I mean, everyone's experience is going to be different. I think that
Yeah.
some of what they do is, you know, I was with Jerry for a long time, and I once said, "Why are you here?" And he just went like this and went, "You're here, you're here, we're here. That's why we're here." And I was like, so we're in different places, and you're trying to meet kind of in the middle, and that made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think their idea of identity is different than ours.
Sure. Well, because they, I mean, obviously they're physical, but they're also uh, beings of spirit like ourselves. So they have the ability to be in either realm.
Yeah, that's
It's more than technological. It's they're evolved spiritually a great deal more than we are, because most human beings, in my opinion, think that when they're dead, their brains ceases to function, and therefore they no longer exist. The average person, because that's what science tells them. That's because that's what the news tells them. That's what Neil Tyson tells them. But that was my phone. Sorry. And so that's what they think, but they really don't know that. And if they actually took the time to do a lot of research, if I have, as I have done, and a lot of other people have done, and Whitley's done, and they would know that there's real substance to the fact that when our brain ceases activity, that we definitely go on. And I've had personal experience with that, to be able to, say from my perspective that I got to see what it's like on the other side, or whatever you want to call it. But they do meet us in the middle ground. And have you had? Do you have experiences with them that seem like dreams, but the dreams are extremely real?
oh yeah. I think that's kind of another avenue of
Mm-hmm.
of conversation between us and them, whatever they are.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I have had those kinds of experiences. I think that if they are technological, their technology is reality. It's kind of like we see our technology as, transportation, and then,
Mm-hmm.
entertainment and
Mm-hmm.
technology. And I think at a certain level, you get into technology of reality. And I think they can directly manipulate that. I mean, that's why there's missing time. And when, like, I've had situations where I had an experience completely awake, and it took over an hour of time that I could perceive of with them. But then I look at the clock and it's a minute later. And the reverse as well. It seemed like I was there for a minute, but then 2 or 3 hours passed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I missed much, but you can tell that how they operate doesn't work like anything we could really perceive of directly.
Yeah, that's true. I had a bizarre experience because they're active still in my life. They certainly are now. There was about 10 years where they weren't. Um, and I woke up in bed and to around 3:25, and Mary was not in bed next to me. I assumed she was in the bathroom, so I got up and went into the bathroom, and she wasn't there. I looked all through the house, looked out in the backyard, no Mary in the house at all. Um, and then I had to go pretty bad, so I went to the bathroom. I actually heard in my mind, just go to the bathroom and go back to bed. But I was pretty concerned. I mean, what do you do in a situation like that? But I went back to bed. And as I'm going into the bedroom, she was in bed. And I when I got up to go to the bathroom and look for her, I went around to the side of the bed and she was not there. A few weeks prior to that, the same thing happened to her with me. But she didn't worry about it quite as much as I did. She figured, well, he'll be there in the morning, went back to bed. you know. But, I mean, she could have been gone for quite a while. And while I had been asleep and I got up, and then while I was in the bathroom, they put her back because they're that good at
Yep.
doing things like that. I wouldn't have heard anything, felt anything, or sensed anything. She'd simply be back in. So yeah, they can manipulate reality rather well. So have you ever experienced something in your reality, whether it be in the house or outside, that you thought was one thing and then it turned out as you looked at it, it was something else and it was them?
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, people relate all the different paranormal things together. And
Yes, sure.
my my grandmother had passed, and I thought she was in the front yard. And I thought to myself, how could my grandmother be in the front yard? And also, what's she doing out there? And she used to knit these little Christmas like ornaments made out of like crochet. And she was out there in the front yard making crochet like she used to. And I thought to myself, this is not making any sense whatsoever. And it was clearly them. And they, you know, as I tell people, if you say you got on a spaceship and met Jesus or your dead grandmother, I'd believe you because I've heard and seen weirder stuff. Like I say, I think their technology is reality, and they can manipulate things and show you whatever they want to show you. And it's not necessarily anything that I think is they're attacking or this is negative. I just think this is just how they operate.
Yeah, they have access to what's in your mind, and so having you see your grandmother is something they probably thought you'd like to see, rather than them. Um, in my case, it was a butcher block that I thought my wife left in front of the refrigerator as I'm trying to get some water during the night, and the thing moved, and it moved its legs, and I went, "What?" And then I saw through it, and it was one of the beings standing right there looking at me, and it just gave me this moment, and then poof, went right through the refrigerator and right through the house and was gone. I tried to run after it into the other room, but it wasn't there. It was long gone. I should have known better, but it was worth a try. Maybe he'd be still standing in the living room and I could ask him some of the questions you asked, because I rarely think to do it. And it's like, as many experiences as I've had, I guess I'm in an altered state. I'm just not thinking about things like that.
That's kind of that high strangeness. You
Hmm.
kind of have to adjust to that. And when it hits you, you're not in like the same reality you're used to. And it's something that I don't know how, but I was more able to cope with. I just felt like, well, this is surreal, and if it's a dream, then I'll have fun with it. And over time you realize it's not a dream. This isn't something that's coming from your own mind.
Hmm.
I very rarely, people often say, oh, did you recover this information through hypnosis? Really not. The only time I've
No.
used hypnosis was self-hypnosis, and that's usually because things were too confusing or too surreal. And it was kind of like, well, I got to look in my own head and see what actually happened. But that's, I'm one of those people that just remembers this stuff. And there's been times when it wasn't a recollection. It happened, and
Yeah, sure.
I think for different people in different situations, you're either willing to accept what's happening in the then and now, or they use whatever tricks they have to blanket for you so that your mind is protected and then you can recall it later.
Yeah, and often, if it's repressed at all, I have found that um, I'll have an experience. I remember little bits of it. Sometimes I remember the whole thing. Um, but sometimes it's little bits in the morning, and it's happened. You absolutely know it's happened. And then in the next few days, I pay very close attention to my dreams. But you really don't have to, because when it's an actual recall of a suppressed event and it comes out while you're dreaming, it's unforgettable. Unlike
Yeah.
other dreams, you'll forget about another dream you had just a day or less, and not even remember it. This one you'll remember 10, 20, 30 years later. So the it happens that night. You get up, you remember how real it was, and you were touching things, feeling things, breathing. It was real, and you just never forget it. All of them I can think of right now, and I remember them. So, um, especially the one where I saw Burt Reynolds floating by the side of my roof, working on my roof. At least he looked like Burt Reynolds, and he had this pocked face. And I heard the sound outside, and I went out and I looked, and there's this guy working on my roof, and I can remember every detail of it. And he had this sweatshirt that was moth eaten and this pucked face, and he was very charismatic. And but when I looked at him, I said, "Hey, you're an alien," because he was floating. He didn't have a ladder or anything. And that's when the being just came down, stood in front of me, and revealed herself and smiled, and then spun like a dust devil and disappeared.
Yep.
I've never forgot that. I got a million of them like that. But that one was recalled, I'm pretty sure, from the dream, but it was so real that after all this time, all I can remember is the experience, and I just never forgot it.
Yeah, I've had dreams like that, and it's almost like you can spot the bad edit. Like when you see a movie and suddenly there's a jump cut, and you
Yeah.
know, like this was not supposed to be in this scene. They didn't edit it properly, and
Yeah.
it's
That's a good analogy. Wow. Someone was saying that watch Brainstorm. I loved that film. That was a great movie.
oh yeah.
Done by Douglas Trumbull, an incredibly brilliant man and visual effects person. Of course, we had 2001 because of him, and it still holds up today, Blade Runner. But the interesting thing about Doug, and I've met Doug and I've spent time with him because I worked in the business, and is that he had a very, very strong interest in UFOs. In fact, towards the end of his life, he had special vans set up with domes on them and special equipment in there. And I never heard anything about what came of that.
I
But
saw some pictures of the camera because I'm a very technologically minded person,
right,
and I looked at it and I was like, that's got a lot of technology in it, and I think there was a kind of a a limited release YouTube show or something that kind of discussed it, but I didn't see any like footage from the magic camera.
results. Yeah, what happened there? That's just really, really, really interesting. So, how long did your dad keep doing this stuff before he retired from it?
Oh, that was my great uncle who was
Your
doing
great uncle.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he wow, he was working originally, and this is back during the dawn of, the nuclear age and
Hmm.
atomic weapons.
Hmm.
And I think he probably did about 5 or 10 years of actual working on nuclear weapons. And then the rest of it was actually related to UFOs and phenomenon like that. Um, he's long passed, but this is how I met Linda Moulton Howe and J. Allen Hynek and Jacques Vallée,
So
as a child.
you got to meet Jalen Hynek. I got
Yeah,
to
in
spend time
passing.
with Jacques, but I always wanted to meet Dr. Jalen Hynek. I used to subscribe to the International UFO Reporter. I still have them all. So you met him? Wow.
Just in passing. It
Yeah.
was one of these things where, he was in town and saw him and it was like, that's him. Oh, okay.
Wow. Yeah, I was on a TV program with Jacques, so I got to spend some time with him, which was nice. We got to talk about this stuff. Wow. So you've seen a lot
Uh,
between all of this, and you met Linda.
yeah. I've actually talked with her on the phone the last couple years about my
She
great
knows about.
uncle
Oh,
and, is there any stories that you missed out on? And, the only one that she really wasn't familiar with was he went out to do a cattle mutilation uh, research, and they had staked out an area for I don't know how long. He was very determined, and a ship went over, and it was just leaking stuff, and he literally chased it down on foot with a mason jar and collected whatever it was leaking, and they could describe what it was, but they couldn't identify what it was. and he had a little sample jar, and everyone in the family could kind of look at it and try to decide what we thought it was, and nobody knew. All they really could determine was that it didn't freeze. That was all they could really figure out about it. And
Was it?
nowadays we kind of know that we have liquids like that. It's like what you use
Sure.
between lenses to keep them from freezing in space.
Hmm.
But we don't, at that time, there was nothing like that there was any need for.
Yeah, it wasn't like Aeroglass, so it was something gelatinous and
It
in
was a fluid. It was some sort of
fluid.
like a cryogenic fluid, um, something that's liquid at room temperature, but you can't freeze it, at least not until you get near like absolute zero or something. But it was just kind of a fascinating thing, and it wasn't anything you could learn from it. It's UFO liquid. What are you gonna do with it?
An alien Fiat, like that, like my Fiat leaks oil. The ship was leaking oil. Yeah. So wow. At least it wasn't black oil.
Yeah.
Wow. Is there anything else like that I mean you can share with us about some of the odd things he found? I mean, I'm assuming that my knowledge of this is that a lot of times they knew when you saw things, even if you didn't talk about it. So they would go and knock on your door
Yeah.
and say, "Can we please talk to you? We're with the Air Force, and this is important." And there was the whole patriotic thing, and helping your country. But if you have something, or you have pictures, or you have video, you need to give it to us because we'll do the most work with it, and then you'll never see it again. And they will deny that they ever got it from you. But I know how that worked. So, but you were actually able to see some of the things that he had before he turned them over. So
Yeah. And in general, it seemed like these were things that had no research interest or weren't in enough quantity that would merit anything further. Um, the best way that it was described to me is, if it's a door hinge, there's nothing to learn here. So if somebody finds out about it, no one's going to come after you for a door hinge or the alien equivalent, even if it's something strange and unusual, or if something's just aluminum. You can take
yeah,
it to a lab and no one's going to bat an eye. They're
yeah.
like, that's aluminum.
That this is often the case that when there's been a crash site and someone's gone back to it years later, they didn't, as much as they vacuumed everything, they didn't get everything. So they'd find a little piece of it. And when they have it analyzed, there was nothing special about it, except maybe one little thing was off that didn't make sense. That isn't the way we did things here on Earth. But other than that, um, they were working with similar compounds of metal. And we have to remember, too, that there's probably a great deal of different intelligence visiting here. Their technology is going to vary, whereas some may have craft that are actually grown, as you suggest. And I think that's a very possible thing. In fact, they're living and they can literally connect with it and communicate with it without having any kind of controls whatsoever, and just by thought tell it what to do and where to go. But then there are actual practical spacecraft that use zero point energy to power themselves, and they do have buttons and they do have lights and they do have things that we're used to. And when they crash, they get broken up, and we find metals that are surprisingly similar to ours, but not exactly. So, is this what you know? Pretty
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
I've seen, I mean, personally, I've seen craft that I've asked them, how does it work? And they go,
Yeah.
it just does. What do you mean it just does? Explain this further. And they were like, what are you looking for? An engine room? And I'm like, yes, show me the engine room. And they're like, well, it's this little tiny crystal. I'm like, that can't be right. And they're like, well, we're just showing you what we want to see. And so, later times I've asked them, how does this thing fly? And they're like, it doesn't. It's just where it is at the moment. Where does it get its power from? Elsewhere. You get those kinds of questions. And other times, like seemingly bigger, more complex ships, you're like, well, I want to see the engine room. They're like, okay, and then you see this big complex thing, and you're like,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
looks right.
I've
That looks
seen
like
it.
an engine to me.
I've seen it. Yeah, it's just you're jarring my memory about that, and it's I remember one time I thought it hummed, but it probably doesn't. But maybe that's what I expected, so that's what they gave me. I don't know, but
You can feel a sound, is how I
yeah,
describe it. I've been
yeah.
around really high voltage electronics, and
Oh,
you think you're hearing something, but you aren't. Your body is just picking up that energy like static, and the static can actually make a sound inside your body, and you can hear it, but you're not
well,
actually
sure.
hearing it with your ears. It's the sensation,
I
and
mean, some people can hear the sound of their brain.
yeah.
Not many people can. I can. And
Mhm.
I remember my high school buddy, we were standing in the absolute silence, and he said, Steve, do you hear that sound? I said, yeah. He says, you know what that is? I said, no, tell me. That's the sound of your brain. And it was just kind of this eerie moment, but I knew exactly what he was talking about. And that was back in high school. Never forgot it. But you can hear it. So, wow. Well, I wonder, I mean, what I know from them is that the source of their power is the source of power that we could all be using, and it's just free and it's there, and it's, you know, when the universe was created, it was just filled with energy that we can tap into without ever burning a single dinosaur. You know?
Energy
So,
of the universe or whatever you want to call it, but yeah, it seems like that's the case because
well, it's what powers us.
yeah.
I mean, I don't know that people think about that, but it's like we don't have a battery.
Nope.
No, but yet we are electrically charged and function that way. And it's continual. It maybe get a little run down by the end of the day, but we recharge it at night by sleeping. That's probably pulling in more energy from the universe. I don't know. But you know, it's kind of funny that when people object to the concept of 0 point energy or free energy, that's ridiculous. It's nonsense, you know. Well, then what the heck powers your body and all the animal life and plant life on this planet? Where's their battery? Where's their source of power? So what are you doing with this subject now? I mean, you've been dealing with it for years. You've experienced all kinds of things. You've seen things that a lot of us here, I'm sure, have never seen, like photographs of a crash site, which would be really something to see. Um, where's this all taking you? I mean, it's obviously got you interested in electronics and technology.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm starting here. Basically, I don't really know what to do with this information, and it's kind of one of those things you hold on to until you know you're not going to hurt anyone else. And I think that that's something that a lot of people who experience this have to internalize.
Hmm.
Sometimes you can hurt other people unintentionally
Hmm.
by talking about or discussing it. And so for me, you know, the time's kind of now. You know, my wife knows everything about all this stuff, and everyone who could be affected has passed away.
Yeah.
So, you know, if somebody wants to look on a family tree, you can do that. It's not going to affect anything, you know. Uh, maybe you know, I've been thinking about writing a science fiction book, kind of like what Whitley has done, where you use your experiences and use that to enhance the story, or maybe
Yeah.
I'll write a book about my experiences or something else. I mean, technologically, it just gives me a different view on how technology can move forward.
You have a
Like,
question on the screen.
yeah, have my kids have experiences. Interesting, you should bring that up. I have two children, and they both have autism, and I've not normally if somebody around me gets affected by them, I'll know, and they never seem to mess with them. I think that to some extent there's a form of compatibility that they're trying to achieve. And if somebody is already compatible, there's nothing to do. They don't have to mess with them.
So they've been fine.
Yeah.
never report anything strange. And so your wife's comfortable with this because my late wife was not. She made me leave. I mean, Whitley was at their house almost every day. Roger Lear was always coming over. Yvonne was always around. I was on numerous television programs during the 90s and all kinds of stuff like that. And it just, when she started seeing evidence that this stuff was real, she wanted me out and out fast. You don't, your wife's okay.
Well, it's something that she would not like to have happen to her, and it seems like
Mm-hmm.
they didn't mess with her at all. And but she's heard sounds, corner of the eye kind of thing, you know, noticed, you know,
The
that I
peripheral
was
sense.
missing.
The
Yeah,
peripheral sense, yeah.
yeah, but it's kind of a matter of like, it's not like she didn't know this early on in our relationship, so you know, it's just now I feel like, I can talk about this stuff and oh, she's staring at me now and smiling.
Smiling is good.
Smiling is
Smiling,
good.
yeah. Well, you know how Mary feels about this stuff, and she's got to stop disappearing in the middle of the night. It's kind of upsetting, but it'll be interesting if this starts to come back for you. How old are you right now? If I
I'm
may ask,
50.
you're 50. Okay, I'm
Hmm.
72, and let's see. Um, I still had stuff going on in the 50s, but nowhere near as much. And it was really in the 90s, in my 40s, in before that, my 30s and 40s. It was prolific. But then, in my 50s, not so much. And when I hit my 60s, it was really quiet. I still had a sense of them. Like you said, I could still hear it and I saw things peripherally and I knew it wasn't over. But then I hit my 70s and um, something's really changed. So, but
I
don't rush being in your 70s.
well, I've heard a lot of people say that there's gaps. Sometimes
Yes.
it's 5 years, sometimes it's 10 years, and whatever it is they're trying to accomplish is compatible with certain times in your life. And it seems like if you're, I don't know, on their mission or they completed whatever it is they've got to do in that part of your life, they're just gone. They're like, okay. But it never really truly goes away.
No.
Sometimes in the quiet, you can hear something or you can detect something, but there's not like an event. You're not like, oh, there's aliens out there in the field. It's more like you get a sense that something is a bad idea. And you're like, where'd that come from? Maybe it's them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've got this thing in my ear, just like Whitley. You have another question on the screen there. So,
Oh, yeah. The last time was, like I said, it had to be like 10, 20 years ago, where my dog Nellie had treated a bunch of aliens. And I just thought that was the funniest thing ever because here it is. I think these are these all powerful beings from beyond. And
the border
th-
collie.
this small border collie is like, nope. And they just went
Oh,
up the tree.
that's a relentless dog. It will not give up.
And
I
they were just
see.
terrified. You could feel from them they were like, "Get nope, nope. We get the spaceship. We're out of here."
This question here I can also answer, and yes, I have.
Oh yeah, I think that's a very common thing. I always see them in like a triangular formation. You just get this field of ships in the sky.
I'm not sure what that's all about because I don't think that's going to come about exactly.
No,
It's more what Whitley said a while back, and he said we will come from within you. So, which actually makes perfect sense when you think about it. There's another question.
I think there's something to that. I think that yeah, there could be something where we're spiritually bound to them from
Yeah,
before. I think that's why it sometimes follows family
sure.
lines.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you so much, Wes. Yeah. Well, I've been talking to the community about that very thing, and amazingly, a lot of them are starting to agree that we somehow agreed to do this. And I can't think of a better way to find out what human beings are all about than to become one. Thank you, Judy. Yeah, as keep the questions coming. We still have a whole 8 minutes left or thereabouts. My father was me. No. Just looking at.
Oh, awakening experiences in these beings.
Yeah.
I personally think so. I think that's part of their purpose. I think they're trying to find a middle ground, and it's kind of terrifying to us, but that's because it's so alien.
Recently, as you probably speak of at the beginning of the show, Mary and I have been spending. I mean, I'm an amateur astronomer. Unfortunately, oh geez, thank you. Our house was flooded not too long ago, and I lost all 3 of my telescopes. So, and they were really good ones. And since then, though, I'm very happy to lay in a gravity chair with some binoculars. And then recently, we got just a couple of nights ago, we got an infrared camera, a decent one, a real decent one that does color. And we're pretty much in the city. We're by the ocean, and so seeing is not that great with light pollution. But when I looked through that, I could not believe my eyes. I could see, I looked at Sagittarius and I could see the glow from this bulge of our galaxy and in the Milky Way. But I saw a lot of other stuff. I mean, things that you couldn't even see with the naked eye. It's really busy up there. A lot of it's our stuff. Some of it's not. And have you been doing anything like that? Have you thought to do anything like that?
Oh, I've got a telescope. I have a thermal camera.
Okay.
And yeah, I've gone out and tried to capture stuff, and it's so funny. The second you put that camera down, that's when something happens.
Sure.
I saw a rainbow in the sky in the middle of the night, just like a streak. And the first thing I thought was, that's Doppler. That's what happens when you approach the speed of light. You change colors. And then it was gone. And then I picked my camera back up and went, oh, great, good job.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that happens to a lot of us.
Sure. That's why we go out after we watch a little television. We go out and we get in the gravity chairs, some blankets, and kick them back and just watch. And my feeling is if we do that often enough every week, we're liable to catch stuff. Because as you said, when I don't have a camera, I even have witnesses with me. Stuff will show up, amazing stuff. And
I'm sorry, the comment just killed me. Our only defense is a border collie.
That is a good one. That is definitely a good one. Well, dogs are magnificent and amazing, wonderful creatures. You never asked them you asked them a lot of questions. You ever ask them what they thought of dogs?
I have. And the first time they answered me about dogs was, why are those people so different? And I think it's because how we perceive of dogs as part of our family, and that's how they see it. And they're like, why are those people so different looking? What's wrong with them? And I'm like, they're dogs. And it was just they've been here forever, and sometimes simple things seem to blow past them, which is why I think that their reality doesn't sync up with ours.
Yeah. I've always wanted to ask them if they have art and music.
Oh, I know they do. It doesn't really make sense to us, but it's clearly something they're enjoying,
Have you seen the latest crop circle? This 12 days.
I have not seen the latest crop circle.
Well, they stopped happening for a while, and now suddenly they're back. And 13 days ago, there was another one. It's the videos on YouTube. And what I love about it is just a video with music. There's no one talking or anything, and they're just showing it from all angles, and it's gorgeous. And it's intricate, and it is art. No question. So you might want to take a look at it. So,
I will.
I mean, the amazing thing about the crop circles, the real crop circles, is that it really appears to me that someone's high up or overhead with some type of technology that uses microwaves, and it's programmed like a laser cutter or a 3D printer, and it literally in a matter of seconds, because it's pre-programmed with the art, lays the wheat down in exactly a precise manner as it does without destroying the stalks. So they're kind of like digital artists using organic material, and it's almost like, you know, they're trying to tell us it's like this stuff can't be faked, and you can't do this stuff, but yet you guys keep talking about Doug and Dave. I think they're dead now, aren't they?
At least retired.
Sorry, so they. But yeah, where are Steve crop circles, Rachel? It's on YouTube. It's just it's the latest crop circle that's appeared. It appeared 13 days ago now. It's incredible. Just do a search for the most recent crop circle, and you'll get the video. I sent it to Whitley last night, and because he was talking the other night about the fact that they weren't happening much anymore. So in closing, since I was just talking about Whitley, he was on with Brett Elder recently, and they were talking about Billy Meyer. What do you think about Billy Meyer?
I'm undecided on Billy
Yeah.
Meyer. It seems like his story makes sense. It sounds like the experiences were probably genuine,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know about his pictures or videos.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, sometimes people are desperate and they want to tell their story and they want to give some sort of proof. And I think maybe some of that was fake. But
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, there was a
like I
whole
said,
bit about the model, but there was only
yeah,
one model, as it turns
yeah,
out. And that model was made by a Hollywood special effects artist for Brett and Lee, so
yeah.
that they could try to do the same kind of effects with it to see if they could simulate what Billy had done, and they were unsuccessful in doing it. And so they gave the model to Billy, and then of course that guy infiltrated his group and went in there and took pictures of it and said, "See, he made a model," and that's all it was. But
Well, I mean, it's a one-armed Swiss man. How is he going to make a complex model?
yeah,
I mean, you know what
I
it takes
know,
to make models for science fiction and special effects. This is
yeah,
very precise work, and it takes a lot of detail. And I don't think he had it in him.
no. Well, you're talking to someone who's done a lot of that work for Hollywood. So, wow. Well, Dennis, thanks so much for coming on the show and spilling your guts and breaking the silence. And is this the first time you've ever talked about this publicly like this?
Yeah, you're the first.
Well, thank you very much. We're very glad to have had you, and thank you for breaking the silence, because that's what we're all about. Stay in
Glad to
touch
be here.
and let us know if anything starts up again. We'd love to find out, because it's my hunch that it will. It's not
All
over
right.
until it's over. And thank you everybody for the support, and thank you for being here tonight. We really love you a bunch, and we'll see you again soon.
Yep.
All right, Dennis. Bye.
All right. Bye.